Toronto just dropped one of the toughest rental laws in Canada, and if you're a tenant or a landlord, this could change everything for you. While tenants are celebrating the new laws, small landlords are saying that they are losing money, losing trust, and losing control in this market. In this video, I'm going to discuss both the sides of this new bylaw that no one is talking about. My name is Harpreet Singh, a financial advisor turning to real estate agent, and if you want to book a 15 minutes call with me, you can do so with the link in the description below. But let's first understand what a renoviction is. A renoviction is where the landlord evicts their tenant to do some major renovations at the property, but those renovations never happen and the current tenants are replaced with tenants who are paying higher rent. And they do so by using a form called N13, which is perfectly legal in Ontario if they're being used for real renovations. But over past year, renoviction in Toronto has exploded. Between 2017 and 2022, the amount of N13 that were issued had increased by 300% across Ontario. And over 70% of them were issued right here in Toronto. For a lot of tenants, it didn't feel like maintenance. It felt like they were pushed out of their own home and were being replaced by someone who was willing to pay a higher rent. One tenant wrote on Reddit, "My landlord served me an N13, but there was no permits, no crew. They pressured me to sign an N11 and offered $2,000 to leave quietly. And a month later, the unit was back online for $800 more." And in the second case, a tenant for a historic building was also given notice to perform major renovations. But those renovations actually never happened. Instead, the tenants were replaced and the units were put back on the market at a higher rent. And these are the type of abuses the City of Toronto is trying to stop by bringing this new bylaw in the system. And that's why on July 31st of 2025, the City of Toronto passed a new bylaw called Rental Renovation License, also known as Renoviction Bylaw. So under this new bylaw, the landlords have to apply for a rental renovation license before they can even evict their tenants for renovation. So this is kind of like you getting permission from the city before you ask your tenants to leave for renovations. And getting this license all itself is a complete new task. So you must apply for this license within 7 days of issuing N13 notice to your tenants. You have to submit building permit, architectural drawing, and you also have to explain why the tenants must move out for this renovation job. The licensing itself costs $700. So if you have ever worked with city, you know getting building permit, architectural drawings, all these costs roughly about $3,000 to $4,000 depending on the size of your renovation. But it just does not stop there. The bylaw also says that once the renovation is complete and if the tenants want to return back to the unit, their rent must stay the same. I have a different opinion on this and I'm going to talk about this towards the end of the video. So under the new bylaw, the landlord actually has two options. One is to provide an accommodation plan to the tenants, which includes arrangements of the tenant's temporary alternate accommodation during the period of repair or renovation that are acceptable for the tenants. And if the landlords do not want to come up with an accommodation plan, they have to come up with a compensation as an option too. So this compensation covers the difference between the current rent and the average rent in the area based on the number of bedrooms in the rental unit. The landlord must pay this amount every month for the duration of the renovation, and to me this is actually crazy. And here is the kicker. If your tenants decide not to come back to the unit, the landlord must compensate the tenants. So they have to give about $1,500 for a studio or a one bedroom, $2,500 for a two bedroom or a larger unit as moving expense, plus you have to provide 3 months rent as a severance. And if the landlord skips this process, they could be fined up to $100,000. I mean, a lot of tenants advocates have been saying that this is a big win for the tenants overall, but not everyone is celebrating. There is a different side to the whole situation that no one is looking at, or at least the media is trying not to showcase. And the other side you have to understand is that a lot of these landlords are not big corporations. These are mom and pop landlords. Imagine your parents who bought a bungalow 20 years ago and they want to keep that house in the family for their retirement. These are the type of landlords we're talking about. And for them, this bylaw specifically feels less of a protection and more of a punishment for them. For example, I know a couple who's living in the West End and they own a duplex, which is, let's say, a bungalow. You have your main floor and you have your basement, and they've been renting out the main floor for $950 because the tenant who is living in there, they've been living in there for the last 17 years. But the market rent for the same unit is about $2,500 to $2,800. And these landlords are so frustrated because they cannot increase the rent. These tenants have been living there for so long, they are not willing to move out. And on top, in Ontario, you can only increase your rent by 2.5%, which comes up to about $25 to $50 a month, which is not enough to cover your increasing property tax, increasing insurance, plus all the maintenance that you have to do while they have been living there for the last 17 years. So in the end, these landlords are being crushed and they're putting money out of their own pocket to support the property. And not just that, in the end, these sellers can't even sell this property because a lot of people would not want to buy properties where tenants have been living there for so long, because they know even if they buy that property, it would be really hard for the tenants to move out. So just like some landlords who abuse the system, there are also tenants who find loopholes in the system and they exploit the whole system, causing frustration and the loss of money to landlords. So they use the system to delay renovation, demand settlement, and even sometimes refusing to move out even if they clearly know that the property needs severe renovation. And in all this situation, if the tenant stops paying rent, LTV takes about 8 to 12 months before the court can hear your case and come to a resolution. And in these type of situations, a lot of landlords lose about $35,000 to $40,000 or even more in the yearly rent. And a lot of time, the properties are also left in very bad condition that they have to do renovations, even if the LTB asks these tenants to move out. So this is not just landlord and housing crisis, this is actually LTB crisis, and they have to fix their timeline so the landlord could feel comfortable getting tenants in their property. And also going back to the bylaw, it is fair that you want to give your tenant a right of first refusal and you want to ask them to come back to the unit once the unit has been fully renovated or the unit has been fixed. But it's not fair for the landlord that they have to give the unit at the same price that they were renting the property out before, because now the unit has been upgraded. It might have newer flooring, newer paint, newer kitchen, and it's not justifiable that the landlords must give this unit at the same rent to the tenants. If the government wants to keep the housing affordable for the tenants, it should not come at the cost of these mom and pop landlords who are having these properties maybe to retire or to help out their kids for education. And that's why government need to come up with different type of resolution where any type of help to tenants is not coming on the cost of landlord losing money. Because if this type of trend keeps on continuing, a lot of landlords will exit the market. People would not want to invest in the market. And if people are not investing and people are not buying units for rentals, that means there would be less affordable housing for tenants. And this is why I feel it is important for us to understand both sides of the story. And government should also do something where landlords can feel comfortable and easy on renting out their property, so they can also build up their trust and have these people to invest more in the Canadian real estate.